Welcome back to our channel, Dr. Stethoscope. Today we are going to learn about the first cervical vertebra, C1, named as atlas. So before going to the class, let me explain you what is mean by vertebra and what are all the type of vertebra and what are cervical, lumbar, thoracic vertebra. Let me take you some. So vertebra. Vertebra is of five types: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum, and coccygeal or coccyx. Out of this cervical, there are seven cervical vertebra, 12 thoracic vertebra, 5 lumbar vertebra. Sacrum are consist of 5 fused to be 1, and coccygeal 4 or 3 fused to 1. Out of this, there are typical and non-typical. As per we are going for more classes, I will explain about typical and atypical type of vertebra, so we can learn there. So before going for atlas, I will give a short idea of cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal or coccyx. Cervical vertebra are found over the neck region. The neck region. We can see here it is given this 7 vertebrae are cervical vertebra, which is formed from the skull, connected to skull, to the thoracic region, which is our ribs are placed. So the neck region is consist of cervical vertebra. Then thoracic is in the middle position of our human body, which have heart, lungs, then some visceral organs. And lumbar is situated at abdominal region, and sacrum is situated at our sexual organs, urinary bladder. These all organs are supported by sacrum posteriorly, and the coccygeal is also known as tailbone, which is the last vertebra. So in the image here, we can see that the overall idea of cervical vertebra I have shown here. Cervical vertebra is identified by foramen transverse area. You all get confused. What is foramen transverse area? Foramen transverse area or foramen transversarium is a Latin word named foramen in transverse processes. Foramen means a hole. I can show you more about that. We can just go to the next part. So the foramen transversarium is the cervical vertebra's key identification structure. So we are going more about atlas. There are two surfaces in atlas, superior and inferior surfaces. So you know that superior is the upper part of the bone, and in lower part of the bone is named as inferior part of the bone. So we can go through the image here. So I'm going to assume that this is the atlas superior portion, and this is the image of inferior surface of atlas. So I will explain each of the parts here. You can see that here is two surfaces containing tubercles, and it is anterior and posterior. This is anterior tubercle and this is posterior tubercle. According to them, they have the arches here, posterior arches and anterior arches and posterior arches here. So it is named as anterior arch and posterior arch here. The two arches combine together to form the lateral mass of the body of atlas. So these are this portion and this portion. is the lateral mass of atlas. Lateral mass. Here you can see that on the lateral mass, a flat facets, you can here see two facets. These facets are known as superior articular facet. Superior articular facet. And the left and the right side contains transverse processes following up with foramen transversarium. Here I explained about this foramen transversarium. Due to the presence of foramen transversarium in the transverse process, the cervical vertebra is extremely different from other vertebra in our human body. So when we are taking more about the axis here, we can see that there are inferior articular facet here, and here groove for vertebral artery. Here it is a groove for vertebral artery, where in which the vertebral artery is passed through the groove of atlas. Here on the anterior surface of atlas, we can see that a facet over the arch, behind the arch. This facet is for dens of axis, in which the axis is attached to the anteriorly posterior part of atlas. We can see, I will show you an image how the atlas and axis are attached together. This image, you can see that the atlas are attached on the dens which is present on the anterior arch. And here is a transverse processes. Then here are superior articular facet, and here it is spine. And another one important thing is that atlas doesn't have spinous processes. Instead of spinous processes, they have tubercles. So we can see here tubercle over the posterior side of the atlas. The anterior arch with anterior tubercle contain oval facet which articulates the dens. Dens is not a part of atlas, not a part of atlas. Dens is a part of axis. You can see that this brown image is showing axis and this gray image is showing atlas. This dens, this portion is called as dens or odontoid processes. It is belong to the axis bone. We can go to the next part. Posterior arch longer than anterior arch. We can see that here the posterior arch is longer than anterior arch. This anterior arch is small and posterior arch is little bit big, and it is little bit longer. With the posterior tubercle upside of posterior arch mark behind a lateral mass by groove. I have explained already here. We have groove in the posterior part of the atlas, which gives space, which give the path to attach the vertebral artery to pass through it. Here it is an animated picture of an atlas. You can easily identify here the superior articular facet, inferior articular facet, here superior articular facet and inferior articular facet, then transverse processes, foramen transversarium here, then posterior arch and anterior arch, the dens which is articulating dens part, then the foramen, vertebral foramen on the middle, vertebral foramen, this violet portion I am showing, this portion, this red portion is known as vertebral foramen, and this is the anterior and posterior images of the atlas. See, this is my knot. I have given a picture to show and I explained here. I'm gonna take the wiring so you can see more. Yeah. Upper surface contains superior articular facet. You know that I have already shown that upper surface contains superior articular facet, which is elongated, concave, directed upwards and medially, articulate corresponding condyle to form an atlanto-occipital joint. This atlanto-occipital joint is a joint between the atlas and axis. Atlas and occipital bone of the skull. Atlas and occipital bone of the skull. Here you can see that. I will show you the image. Here showing the two joints. I will explain two joints from this image, whereas the skull here and the atlas here is attached by forming atlanto-occipital joint. Here the axis and atlas contain atlanto-axial joint. It is very important that articulation of atlas, it contains two joints which are atlanto-occipital joints and atlanto-axial joint. There is no intervertebral disc between the atlas and axis. Atlas and axis does not contain intervertebral disc. It is very important to learn there is no vertebral disc between atlas and axis. Then as you can see here, I have taken the next session that lower surface contain inferior articular facet. I have already taken you and I have already told about that. Here it is circular, more or less or flat, directed downwards, medially and backward, articulate to form atlanto-axial joint. I have already explained about that, the articulating atlanto-axial joint. When we are seeing the upper surface, the articulation in atlas and occipital is known as atlanto-occipital joint, and same articulation on the lower surface is called atlanto-axial joint, whereas atlas and axis forms the joint there. The next last point, transverse process fix in shape between mastoid process and mandible to help the rotatory motion. I will explain more about skull in further classes, so I can show how the transverse process is related to mastoid process and the mandible in rotatory movements. So these are all idea about atlas. I hope you understand my classes. I hope you have thorough with every point. This PDF is made by myself, and this images I have taken from Google. I have searched for licensed one and I have searched and make this PDF. So if you have any doubts or any kind of queries, please feel free to contact with me. You can ask any doubts or comments. See you in next class. Next class I will explaining about the axis, the second cervical vertebra. Bye for now. See you next time.